Good evening and welcome to the Comprehensive Plan Update Committee for Monday, February 6, 2023. First order of business is to call to order and make the note that we do have a quorum for tonight. Things have been a little crazy the last week or so as far as our usual getting support from the town due to no involvement at all in the town failing, but simply circumstances beyond everybody's control. That being said, there is an email that went out as far as the calling in for the Zoom. There seemed to be some confusion because there were actually two numbers posted. We're going to do our best to cope with that to make sure everyone has access. I see we do have committee members and the town clerk that have been able to Zoom in, so I'm hopeful that that'll work for everyone else. Also, the second order of business would be the previous meeting minutes. And Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, but the January 17 minutes usually are included in the e-packet. But they were...
Yes, and I sent out an e-packet very late this afternoon. I apologize for that.
Okay. So it may be that everyone did not have an opportunity to review those minutes. I will tell you that, as we've discussed before, the official minutes of the meeting are the video. Therefore, I would ask, has everyone had an opportunity to see either the printed minutes or the video?
Yes.
I have.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes.
So if there's, Brad, you have? So if there's no objection, I would move that we accept those minutes as written or as filmed. No objections? Brad? Can't hear you, Brad. Can't hear you. Can't see that. Is that the phone?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. You want to call us?
Charades.
I guess my question would be, is there a reason from the videographer's perspective why Brad can't be heard?
It appears as though his Zoom is muted.
He's muted.
Brad.
Yeah.
How's that?
All right, that works better.
All right, sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Videographer.
No problem.
Hey, just a question, Peter. There was a mention of some people who had expressed interest in coming on to the committee, and I didn't see any mention of names or resumes. Was there a mention, or is that why it wasn't in the minutes? Because there are no resumes.
I believe I've seen one application. And it was, once again, Sue, was that included in the e-packet?
It was.
It was. So Brad, I believe if you look now at your e-packet on the town website under comprehensive plan, you'll see that application. Getting back to the business at hand, is everybody satisfied to vote on the minutes? All those in favor? Unanimous? Great. Okay, also, Sue, one other question.
Yes.
On the website, what I saw regarding minutes, there's an indication beside the December 7th minutes that says awaiting approval.
Yes, I haven't gotten to upload those as yet. I wanted to get tonight's meeting going first, and I'm going to focus on that tomorrow.
Yeah, okay, you're fired.
Okay. Yay, bye.
All right, so what we'll do is we'll correct those minutes as far as making sure that they're posted and been approved and all that sort of good stuff, because they have been approved. They were approved at the meeting in January. All right, well, enough on minutes. I would make a motion that since we have guests here tonight, and since, you know, and I know this is scintillating discussions about logos and videos, that we, if there's no objection, that we move new business, A, North Star Planning interview, and B, committee applicants. Well, I'll say this, it will at least move A, North Star Planning interview to the head of the agenda in order to, in deference to our guests. Do I have?
I'd second that.
So moved. All right. So moved. So the stage is yours.
Okay. We had a few slides, which we were able to get up on the other screen here, but I'm not sure where I should sit or stand exactly. But that's
Right there.
All right.
Perfect.
So my name is Ben Smith, and I'm the principal at North Star Planning. And tonight with me is Kate Birch.
I,
Kate is a planner at North Star, and yeah, that I think would work. And we had submitted a proposal in response to the RFP that the town had issued, and we're here tonight to kind of go over our approach to the project, just provide a brief overview, a little bit of who we are. And if we can answer some questions, we'd love to have an opportunity to have a little bit of a conversation about. This appears to be on, I think. If it's not, someone will tell me. So I think what I will do, without objection, just kind of walk through a few slides, provide a little background, and then if there's questions along the way or questions at the end, I'm happy to, we can be flexible on how we handle that. So once again, my name is Ben, and Kate's here with me this evening, and there's a couple other folks at North Star Planning who would be involved in the Raymond project. We are located in New Gloucester, and we've got combined a very good, diverse planning background. My experience before North Star Planning 5 years ago was with the town of Wyndham. I was a planner there for 11 years. Part of that time was planning director, and Kate has some direct support with the town of Topsom. So our resumes are in the proposal. I won't go through those, but I'm happy to answer a little more background if you wish.
So sorry.
Our response was really based on, in part, our understanding of the town, and that was, you know, based on personal experiences that we have with Raymond and things that were noted in the RFP. But some of the things that I know are going to be important as the discussion around the comprehensive plan continues is protecting water quality and natural resources, balancing tourism and economic development with the needs of year-round residents. So folks who are here part of the year or passing through, with folks who live, work, go to school here, and dealing with the impacts of growth pressure on community character. So I will hand the mic over to Kate to talk about water quality.
Yeah, so one of the things that we think will really be a thread throughout this comprehensive planning process is water quality, water resources. You all are one of the stewards of the water quality of Sebago Lake. You also have a lot of other lakes, ponds, streams, and these are sort of very key to the identity of the town, as well as the well-being of the residents, your groundwater, your aquifers. So looking at protecting these resources from pollution, from impacts of development, from the impacts of other uses, like recreational uses, as well as ensuring that these that water resources are available and accessible to all members of the community and residents here is also are kind of a big balance that will be part of this process.
Great, thanks. And there's a couple images here of Wyndham Open Space Plan and a Yarmouth Open Space Plan that we've worked on in the last several years that to greater and lesser degrees dealt with conservation perspectives as well as recreation and use of natural resource perspectives. The next thing we wanted to talk a little bit about is kind of that tourism seasonal aspect nature of the town. We've got a couple projects under our belt and that are ongoing right now with the town of Tremont and Bristol. Those are coastal communities. So in many ways they're different from Raymond, but in a few key ways, in particular dealing with seasonal traffic, dealing with housing affordability issues and short-term rentals could be an issue, and trying to, in those communities in particular, ensure that there's a sustainable year-round community. And I think that that's probably less of a concern in Raymond, but it could have something in common with those as far as evening out the seasonal swings that come with employment, wages, and those types of things when you have a seasonal economy. And then finally, we wanted to talk a little bit about, this was some data we pulled from the census about growth pressure. And this is probably not new to a lot of people here in this room, but when we were looking at how Raymond has grown over the last 100 years. It was relatively flat population, growing slightly between 1920 and 1960, and then it really exploded in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And since then, the population is measured by the census has leveled off. And those are, year-round, people who call Raymond home. But that probably isn't the whole picture. Another bit of data here from the ACS is that Raymond has a very high, much higher than Cumberland County in general, seasonally vacant structures. So this is an indication of that, what we were talking about a couple slides ago, how the code office has probably been quite busy with new homes, new septics. It's not just internal renovations and decks. I'm sure there's plenty of those, but the building activity has been much busier than population growth. So if we had multiplied 2.3 people times each new home that's been built in the last 20 years, we would expect the population to be much higher than it is today. So that's an indication, I think, to some degree of that seasonal nature of Raymond's population compared with the county and certainly with the state. So we do have a lot of local experience, as I've mentioned before, my work experience prior to North Star Planning, but also since in the last 5 or 6 years working with communities in this region and throughout Cumberland, Androscoggin counties. Open space plans, comprehensive plans, downtown plans. We can come back to any of these if you have questions about those, but that was really kind of the foundation. I know that's not the whole picture and there's going to be many other things to talk about, but I wanted to at least give you a sense of where we were coming into the process from. And I'll turn it over to Kate to talk a little bit more specifically about the proposal. We don't plan on going page by page through the proposal. Certainly happy to answer questions about it, but Kate's gonna go through an overview on the slide.
Sure. So we just wanted to sort of go through our approach to this comprehensive planning process. It starts with a period of data collection. So gathering past plans, the state's data, preparing those inventory chapters, a lot of collaboration with town staff to help us collect a really robust base of data about the town, about the built environment, and I start to identify what issues are happening. And then from there, we start working with the community vision and values. And that basically, you all are really the experts on what's going on in your communities. So taking that data and working with public participation to make that data meaningful, to kind of ground truth it, and to get more perspectives and help us better understand the town. And from there, we start to identify the goals, policies, and strategies that will be part of this comp plan. And it's important for those to be realistic, actionable, implementable goals that the town can work on over the next 10, 20 years. And as we develop those strategies, there will be multiple touch points back with the community and public participation to make sure that we're connecting the vision and the values of the town with the goals that are in the plan. And then the final stage is drafting and adoption. So that will include developing an implementation strategy, identifying some funding options, and then the processes of local adoption and state approval. Yeah, and then we also wanted to just share a little bit about our engagement strategies. We think it's really important to make sure that we're hitting a lot of different modes of engagement with the community to make sure that we're reaching as many people possible in the ways that they feel comfortable, kind of meeting people where they want to meet us. So we do a lot of in-person engagement, which can include big open house workshops, smaller listening sessions with specific stakeholder groups, presentations, or also pop-ups at local town events. And then also sort of running parallel an online engagement plan where we have project website, social media, an email list. We put out online surveys to echo a lot of the public participation surveys that we do in person for people who feel more comfortable jumping in online. And we also will make videos to accompany some of the surveys and other things we're putting out to help people engage in the process. And then we do a lot of print too, putting up flyers in local places, sending out postcards, direct mail, working with community members who might want to put something in the local paper to try and reach the widest range of people possible.
Okay. So this is the project timeline that we had put into the proposal. It includes all of the tasks that are more fully scoped out in the proposal itself, but also Kate had touched on those a moment ago. So essentially, the first part of the project is that research project. It's essentially digging into state data and getting existing conditions in those inventory chapters. And then I think the best part of the process, the most exciting part of the process, is when you start looking ahead. So the first part, the research project, is almost looking back. It's understanding how you got to where you are today. What do we have as a community? And the looking ahead part starts when you start engaging folks around the vision and values of the community. So that in this timeline is kind of a late summer activity that continues through the winter and would lead into some early drafting in the springtime frame with first drafts of a plan next summer. So that is an overview of the project timeline. And I think that's the last slide we had, knowing that you all have had a chance to review the proposal, and if you had specific questions about anything we've shared in the proposal itself or highlighted here in the slides, we'd be happy to have that conversation at this point.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Kate. So what I'd like to do is open it up to questions. They don't have to be limited to the proposal, but so that people don't get overlooked, I'd like to start with committee members on Zoom. So I'll start with Frank. Any specific questions you might have, Frank?
Presently not.
Okay.
I'll
Brad?
wait until we get into the discussions.
Okay. Brad? You're muted, Brad.
Thank you, Peter. Hey, Ben, thank you very much for joining us here this evening. I appreciate your taking an evening, both of you taking evenings out of your lives to join us on our schedule. Are either of you familiar with Roger Martin in
I'm not.
his work at all in planning and strategies? I just was kind of curious because, the plans are vitally important. Implementing them and coming up with a strategy for implementing them is kind of important too. We, most committees you probably work with, you do a comprehensive plan, and then do you recommend a implementation committee afterwards, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I think it's fairly common for communities to have either a CompPlan group continue on with a new charge after the plan's been adopted, or to have a separate group, some group outside of the select board and town staff who are going to be able to keep an eye on the plan specifically. I think you are right. I don't know the work of Roger Martin specifically, but I do know that there's a lot of frustration in communities where you go through all of this work and nothing happens, or the perception is nothing ever changes. So this is a big project. It takes a lot of people, and I think it's very reasonable to expect that you would see results from this. And to that end, Kate had mentioned it, our work, and having been a planner and dealing with a lot of plans that, to greater or lesser degrees are implemented, we want to make sure that our plan recommendations are going to be reasonable, actionable, and something that the town can implement. So to that end, the plan horizon for a comp plan is 10 to 20 years. So when you look at the vision statement itself, it's very often asked, what kind of community do you want to live in 10 years from now or 20 years from now? And when we write recommendations, it's very often a shorter time frame. What do you need to do in the next 5 years to get to the point where you start making progress toward that longer term vision? What can this select board do and the next select board do over the next couple budget cycles to start moving in that direction? And I'm not sure I can get the slides back or not, but I would encourage you to even just take a look at the cover of the Wyndham plan. That was an early attempt. That was written when I was the planning director in Wyndham, and we were challenged to, get the plan on one page. Everybody was tired of, 300-page documents, and nobody knew where the recommendations were. So we said, okay, we're still going to do a 300-page document, but let's take a crack at getting it on one page. And there were 4 big things, and those are right on the cover, and there's a few bullet points under each one, and that makes it very easy to communicate. It's easy for elected officials and volunteers to understand what the priorities are, and you don't have to make even progress every single year. Like, there are going to be some years you move ahead in open space, and other years you move ahead in economic development, but having a manageable number of priorities with clear goals can provide really good guidance to elected officials and staff to make progress.
Which plan are you referring to? Is that around 2018 or so? Or was that the earlier plan back in the early 2000s?
The one I'm referencing is the maroon colored. It says 2016 update. The Wyndham plan. Yeah.
Okay. And then just one other question I had for you is, you talked about a big open house event and getting out to visit with some of the stakeholders. And what have you found to be an effective way to reach people? And what kind of attendance have you had at those, neighborhood meetings?
I do think that we're still in that phase where the pandemic is very fresh to people, so not everybody is jumping up at the opportunity to go to a big open house. But what we've had success with recently is kind of having these parallel events where we have an open house that has an online option for folks. So I think in an event we had in Bath, we advertised it both through all the town's email lists, social media, as well as our own email outreach, and through contacting some stakeholders in the town, like they have a Main Street Bath organization. We also did the old school way of hanging up flyers around town. And we got, I think, 60-something people came out to an open house on a cold Tuesday night, which isn't so bad, and then we've had ongoing online participation from people who didn't make it to the in-person event, and we've had over 100 people jump in on that so far. So I don't know if you want to talk about the other ones you've done recently, but
I think you made the point I was going to make, is that people need options, and it can be very tough if the only way you're inviting public comment is to have people come into an after dinner meeting at the town office or in a room like this. It's giving people an opportunity to participate online or to meet them where they are. And what that means is taking advantage of community events and gatherings that are already happening. So you don't need to convene these things, you just need to be around, you need to be a part of it. And some examples from that PowerPoint we shared were like some food truck events that were ongoing in Gorham, and we just brought a little canopy and some plans and let people look at them, and people wandered over and said, hey, what are all these pictures of our town? And that led to conversations around, the future of that part of Gorham. So those types of interactions, it's part of I call it the well-balanced breakfast of outreach. So those kinds of outreach, if you go to a food truck or you go to a carnival, you're going to have like maybe 30 seconds of people's time. You're not going to get real deep, but it's great for a wide, broad-reaching awareness. If you have people come and choose to invest a couple hours of their time in the gym or at a community meeting, there you can get much deeper. So I think that it requires a mix, but I guess we are seeing people coming back to in-person meetings, especially open house kind of things where they can drop in where they want to. Like if you leave the doors open for 3 or 4 hours, sometimes people will stay for an hour, sometimes they'll stay for 20 minutes. But there's lots of different techniques and different strategies that we can use, and we would want to probably talk that through with the committee a little bit more to figure out like what is the right mix of activities for Raymond.
Thank you. Just one final question that I have here for you while you're here, Ben, is you obviously are aware of the phenomenal growth that's happened in the Wyndham area for probably 40 years. And Raymond participated in some of that growth during the 80s and 90s, and it has slowed considerably since then. Do you have any thoughts on how Raymond has been effective at slowing that growth on the Wyndham-Raymond border, and what have we done right in your judgment that's enabled us to slow that growth and manage it better?
It's a good question, and I don't know that I've got a real good answer for it. When I was looking at the census data that was up on that slide a few minutes ago, it did remind me a lot of Wyndham, in particular the 70s and 80s. Wyndham has continued to grow at I think the last couple decades have probably been about 14% census to census, and Raymond was like 2 to 3% from census to census. So I think there's probably a number of reasons for that. I think it has maybe given Raymond a little more breathing room and maybe a little less pressure, maybe more space to have a conversation about rural character and the future of access to natural resources and those kinds of things that have been much more urgent conversations in Wyndham over the last 5-10 years. So I think from that perspective, that's been an effect, but I couldn't say, without maybe learning a little bit more about Raymond, like how that has happened. I do know that Raymond's a little, one town further down the road from Portland, and I think that is likely to be part of it. But, I'd be interested if you had ideas or other people in the committee had ideas about that.
Sure, John?
I think one town down the road is a big part of it. And the other thing that's significant, I think, is that there's not a lot of available affordable housing. And so a lot of Wyndham's growth has been younger people and, people with school-age children. And I just think the opportunities have been greater there for housing, and it's closer to where they work.
Chris?
I would add that our zoning is quite different than Wyndham's. Our lot sizes are much larger. Most of our town is either in shoreline zone or rural residential, which the minimum lot size is 2 acres or 3 acres. And then we have a very small village residential area where you can go down to a 1 acre lot. So I think the zoning is something that the last comprehensive committee did right, is to slow growth. I think that, you got to have a bigger lot, and it keeps Raymond more rural than on some of the urban areas that are closer to Portland, like Westbrook or Gorham or even Wyndham.
That's a good point. That also contributes to the point I made about affordable housing as well. And so then you get to the idea of demographics and, community vitality, and I think you need a mix of peoples. And, I think one area we've been short on has been the younger families, and I think that's, something we should pay attention to in this plan, in my opinion. We seem to do really well with empty nesters. We do well with people who are, second homes, vacation homes, that sort of thing, but not as robust when it comes to attracting young families.
Or keeping families here.
And keeping them here, yeah.
Greg, did you have a comment?
About that specifically? Yeah. Well, I guess one thought I had is you said that we have larger lots typically than Wyndham. And from a forester's perspective, we've worked with a lot of forest landowners, and ultimately they have sold their property, they've subdivided it. And you go back and you look at it, and we kind of see it as a waste of land when you require large house lots. I think New Gloucester has like 5-acre minimums in some cases. And we're of the attitude, and I'm speaking for myself and for some foresters who have a lot of experience with selling, managing woodlots that we see turn into developments. And we're kind of the attitude, if you're going to subdivide a piece, cram as many houses into that piece as you can to conserve maybe another piece of land, so that it might stay a solid piece of forest land. That's my comment. And when it comes to septic disposal, if you have enough houses on a development, maybe there's a central septic system that might be actually more sufficient and more efficient than a whole bunch of individual septic systems. And I'm not an expert on septic systems, but it's just my thought.
I might just jump in.
Thanks for the time.
To follow on Greg and Chris, your input here would help. It seemed like in the 2010 era, when we were doing ordinance work, the open space subdivision was a piece that was added to the ordinance, and we did a number of them. Does that ring a bell? Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct, and I would tell you that they are still being built. They were phased. We have several large subdivisions that haven't even been started that are open space subdivisions, where they do cluster, like Greg was talking about, the houses and then preserve land for open space. That is a concept that is in our ordinance now. Maybe we need to revisit it, but it's definitely in there, and Greg's right. That's how you do preserve larger tracts.
Well, when it comes to the open space, a lot of these lots simply aren't big enough so that the reserved open space can be managed for timber. It's hard to do it when if you've got 15 or 10 acres, you're pretty much at the limit where it's going to be feasible to do a timber sale and manage the property. It can be done. It's the nature of forestry has changed in terms of the machinery they use. A lot of people use large machinery, and they just require a lot of volume to move onto a woodlot. So the open space concept, it sounds good. I put some thought into about how effective that is in terms of being able to manage at least, the forest resource of the open space.
Great. Sean, questions for Ben or Kate?
No, I appreciate the conversations, and it's great listening to you. I don't have anything to kind of add or to ask right now.
Very good. Kayla?
Oh, sure. Can you, if you can, provide us with any sort of thinking out of the box or really innovative ideas that you have been involved in with other towns that you're particularly proud of and you would like to brag about right now?
For just anything?
Well, involving the comp plans, like something where a community sort of thought out of the box and, sorry, Don.
That's two down.
Do you want to take a, it sounds like it could be anything. Okay. I think the one, there's an implementation effort going on right now in Pownell. We did not work on the comp plan, but helping them think about preserving rural character and what is rural character, and that is a question that always comes up, and I think it essentially could be defined as the sense of quiet country living and open country roads that people experience in town. It could be, a rural economy of woodlots and gravel pits, natural function of groundwater recharge or wildlife habitat. And so this would be something that I would love to explore a little bit more of like, what is rural to Raymond? Is it that veneer of rural character, or is it the actual rural function of rural economy? And the answer is different for every town. So in Wyndham several years ago, it was, we don't care, essentially, how many houses are in the subdivision as long as we can't see them from the public road. And in Pownell, they are much more on preserving blocks of land for wildlife habitat, to also preserve the economic value of that land as rural land. So whether it's harvesting timber or using it for pasture or hay. So balancing those kinds of considerations and getting more to your point, we're having conversations in Pownell now about maximum lot sizes, where it essentially would look like we're reworking their existing cluster ordinance to be more of a conservation subdivision, and putting more focus on design, and having it be less about a math problem, what is the maximum number of lots you can put on this piece of property, to what are the important characteristics of this land to preserve as development is considered, and then work with the planning board to come up with a creative design for that property. So that's something we're working on right now in a community that is kind of on the frontier between Portland and Auburn, and they're experiencing some growth pressure from both sides. Do you want to, I'm thinking about the solar ordinance that you worked on and we're administering in Topsom.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if solar is an issue in Raymond. Kate's got some ideas about that.
It is.
Got some projects.
Yeah, so when I was working in Topsom has a fairly new solar ordinance that basically the town attached a habitat mitigation fee to it. So they used an existing open space plan to basically attach a value of high, medium, or low quality habitat to every parcel in town. And if you want to build a solar farm on it, you have to pay a fee based on what the level of the quality of habitat is. And that fee then goes into a fund that the town uses to preserve other habitat in partnership with the land trust or in other ways. But I think and that was an interesting way of, solar is also a pretty big business right now. So it was an interesting way to see that solar companies were happy to pay that fee if they had to, and also that it did encourage the engineers working on these developments to guide where they're placing solar panels and stuff away from those high value habitat zones and more towards the lower cost, lower value habitat for them to build on, which was helping seemingly to preserve some of those large blocks of habitat.
Kate, what was the map layers that were used to define high, medium, low? They were, or existing mapping that had already been done. They didn't do any additional on the ground reconnaissance, or maybe they did.
They were using, the maps were from the open space plan, which was done in 2012. So they're actually probably going to update them soon, but they were based on sort of surveyed state data, wetlands, habitat maps, but also based on a community values matrix that the town did a public process on, where people ranked what pieces of land were important to the community, whether they were for a view shed, like everyone likes driving down that road, seeing that big open field, places that people like to hunt, like to fish. So it was a combination of sort of like scientifically significant land and the land that was important to the residents.
Cool. Any other questions, Cal?
I'll hold mine so I don't take everybody else's. And if
right.
there's any left over, then I'll go for it.
Okay. John Clark.
Could you provide a few examples of some climate initiatives that you've done in other towns and what those have looked like? And, I think some articles were sent around, and I think a big part of this would be, how could they be implemented? And I know that there is several avenues for grant money available for the town to take advantage of, because I do think that we are looking at the value of some of these improvements, and how we pay for those things is an important piece of that equation.
So when you talk about climate initiatives, are you talking about how climate is incorporated into the CompPlan process, or are you talking about energy plans or street light to LED conversion type projects?
More the former.
In the comprehensive planning process?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways that we've worked on this, and I will say that this has become the most popular non-state required comprehensive planning topic to incorporate into a planning document. There's a couple ways you could approach it. One would be to have a dedicated, we're going to have a new chapter in our comp plan dealing with climate adaptation and climate issues in our community. And the other is to look at those kinds of concerns throughout the project. So I'll take a step back, and I'm sure a lot of you, and actually I think there's a fair number of folks on this group who were part of the prior comprehensive, or the current comprehensive plan drafting. So you may know, but I'll say for folks who may not, there's a lot of state required inventory chapters: transportation, natural resources, municipal services, and so on. Each one of these can be viewed through a climate lens. So changes to the weather and changes to the climate will have an impact on transportation infrastructure. Changes to climate will have impacts on municipal services and so forth. So that can be a way to bring that more into the heart of a plan. You know, one of the make it one of the core features that carries through all of the chapters. And I think either approach is doable. Communities have been working on that from both perspectives, but it's a good conversation to have early in the process as you start drafting. You know, should this be something that we want to look at kind of on its own, and then think about how it factors into recommendations, or is each chapter going to have one or two or a handful of recommendations specifically dealing with climate change?
Mm-hmm. And I guess just a follow-up would be, you know, maybe this falls more on the implementation stage, but do you also include, you know, ways that we would be able to implement these, or, you know, kind of that roadmap, or is that really outside of the scope?
I mean, I think that I'm not going to. I'm fairly new to North Star, so I'm not going to speak for how Ben likes to do an implementation strategies matrix. But I think that in my previous experience, I worked with the city of South Portland and Portland on their One Climate Future plan, which had a really robust implementation matrix. And I think especially with a lot of those climate initiatives, which they touch all the other aspects of the plan as well, but you can kind of separate them into sort of three categories. You have the things that are like really big. We need to wait for the state to have a program where they're going to help us with this. DOT is going to help us with this, or even federal money is going to help us with this. Then there's things that the town can enact on a local level, like some zoning changes to land use policy, you know, requiring EV chargers, things like that.
Yeah.
A capital improvement plan. And then there's the things that are more of like an advocacy, public-private partnership kind of thing, like saying the town's going to have a climate committee that works with local businesses, or that publicizes, like in Topsom, we had an energy committee that did a lot of outreach with members of the community to show people how they could personally save energy by better insulating their homes, or adding solar panels to their house, or other initiatives. So I think you kind of split it, especially with something like a lot of those climate change things. Not everything is something that the town of Raymond can personally fix, but you can sort of categorize where the town needs to advocate for it, what the town can do, and what the citizens can do.
Okay, thank you.
I think Kate had a lot of good ideas, and it kind of touched on the idea of, you know, this comprehensive plan is one really high-level conversation and high-level recommendations. It's not going to be the energy plan, and it's not going to be the open space plan or the transportation plan, but it can help inform those things.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to make sure that coming out of this process, because again, I was a municipal planner, and there should be more recommendations in here than just, we recommend you do another study, or we recommend you do more planning. There need to be some things that you can get right going out of the gate as soon as you adopt the plan. Maybe you've even got a head start on a few things as a result of the process that you're going through right now. So that's the only other thing I'll say is, like, you may not get as detailed as you would in an energy plan with this kind of effort, but that's not any reason to say, you know, we're going to have to save that for a future study.
Yep.
I think there's real things you can do.
Greg.
Thank you. This is the land use ordinance from 1993 in Raymond. And this is a land use ordinance as of now. Can you make this thickness? You don't really have to answer that question. But the question I do have is in regard to town government. We have a select board and we have town meeting, but for, was it 3 years now, we have not had a town meeting. We vote secret ballot. And structurally, for the people, I think we need a town meeting. And I'm just thinking, is this something that needs to be addressed through the comprehensive plan? Or am I opening a can of worms? The other option might be for this town to become a town council instead of a select board. And maybe that's not even a comprehensive plan consideration, but in my mind, I think the issue is significant for the people of the town of Raymond. A lot of people, I think Sue could help me with this, they went to vote. Our budget and any ordinance changes are voted by secret ballot, and a lot of the people that went there didn't prepare themselves. They didn't know what was going to be on the ballot, and they found themselves looking at things to vote on, and they had no reason to vote one way or another or understanding of it, simply because they didn't know what the issues were. And I don't know if some of them stayed. I think some stayed and took a lot of time and read it. Is that right, Sue?
That's correct. And one little technicality I will correct them, Greg, and that's that even though we're voting it via secret ballot, it is still a town meeting. It just isn't an open town meeting.
Yes.
So that's just a technicality.
I did know that, and I did omit saying that. But anyway, there's an opportunity for anybody, they should review what's being potentially presented to them, but at least at a town meeting, they have an option to ask questions, question this, why are we spending this money on that? But by secret ballot, we've lost that opportunity to do that. And that's just a concern of mine, and maybe it's a comprehensive plan issue, maybe it's something other.
I have an answer for it as well.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
I can tell you what the thinking behind what we're doing now is, if you like. And so you get about 60 people at town meeting, so you might have 60 informed voters. I'm going to say you have several hundred voters, at a town meeting by secret ballot. There are going to be people who aren't prepared and maybe are unsure about how to vote, but there's a public hearing, of course, for them to attend if they wish. They can read, articles in the newspaper about it. They can get materials at the town office and or online. They can ask questions in advance. So I think the selectmen's thought on it has been two things. One, the pandemic safety is what, was the original idea. But the idea of having a much greater turnout is appealing. So that's where it's been. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stay there. They consider it each year. It hasn't been a final decision. And it's because, as we know, the pandemic is still ongoing. With respect to the comprehensive plan, probably Ben will answer it. I hope he'll answer it this way. I think it's a legitimate thing to be in the comprehensive plan. I think there comes a time in the life of towns where they, change from a Board of Selectmen form to something else, or maybe they look at the way that they, consider voting. I know my hometown of Scarborough made the switch to a council plan, decades ago. It was a town meeting town. Every town in Maine, I think, started out as a town meeting town. So the points you make are good, and I don't know. I mean, in the past, when I've tried to present the town council idea in towns I've been in, that hasn't gone very far. People do like the idea of the town meeting. It's the purest form of democracy if you participate. Increasingly, people don't.
Yeah.
I would just add to that a significant factor certainly was the pandemic. Prior to that, it was the RSU. The majority of people that turned out to town meeting when I first got here, the biggest budget cost was the school budget. Once the school budget went away, it seemed like a lot of attendance went away.
Yeah, that's right.
Anything else?
I'm good. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, John Clark, for bringing up the energy and the climate overlap and how that could be efficiently folded into the plan. That'll be key with the funding opportunities we've seen come through. You guys may well have reviewed. We had an open space plan that we put together with Hugh Cox starting in, I think, in '04, and it got approved in '08, I'm going to say, and that was a good process. I think there's probably still a fair amount of relevant information in that plan still. I don't think there's a huge appetite for a large chunk open space efforts. The community forest was certainly a success and had the town behind it. But there are plenty of other parcels of scale in town, and it's probably time to, now a decade and a half on, to to refresh on that and which of those parcels have the highest value, and certainly with probably another 2, 3, 4, 5 years of solar pressure that's gone quiet for the interim, it seems, with the CMP backlog, that the comp plan highlight areas that we help us, or I suppose it would be direct the town to update the open space plan, but or it might be a simple refresh to just bring those priority parcels to the forefront. And then I think the only other piece is, which Brad and I are near and dear to our hearts, of course, is staying on the transportation piece and making sure the Lake Region bus keeps rolling, and to connect this remote community to the city of Portland more easily. So among all the other good ideas, I should say here, yeah, climate, open space, transportation.
You know, it's interesting to hear you talk about open space from the standpoint of, it brings to mind the process we went through in Gray a few years ago as they updated their comprehensive plan. And this was maybe getting to your question as well. The state requires you as a community to say, these are the growth areas and these are the rural areas, and maybe you have a few transitional areas. And those are the places you're going to encourage or incentivize growth, and the places you're going to protect from the impacts of growth. And what Gray had done is, you know, they said, you know, the last couple plans we've done have basically been, the rural zone just means status quo. There will continue to be residential development happening in those parts of town that we consider rural today. So they had, a couple of years ago, taken the opportunity to say, there will be large parts of town that are critical rural areas. And so there were rural areas that were more okay with that idea of quiet country living, and those are appropriate for low density residential single homes or small subdivisions. But they said there are certain places along the Royal River, certain places in the Little Sebago watershed that we don't want status quo to continue in those places. Those are the places we want to restrict and slow down the amount of development. And I think that they're still discussing how to implement that part of it. Recommendations around zone changes are typically some of the harder things when it comes to implementing ideas in a comp plan. But that was pretty key to the effort that their committee had recommended. And it was an idea, I think, that, you know, based on large habitat blocks, environmental values, that there are certain places in their community where it was only going to be appropriate for the lowest levels of new development, and those would be the places where they were going to work with the land trust to target future acquisitions and those kinds of strategies. So again, not an open space plan, but you can advance some of those concepts through a comp planning process.
Anna, question?
Yes. So I think we're all excited that you've worked with some of the towns that are close by to us and that we work with on a regular basis. One of my questions is, how do you focus and differentiate the needs of Raymond versus what those other towns are immediately surrounding us that may be similar, but we consider them to be different? And how do you prioritize Raymond's character as opposed to falling back on what you've already done before?
Yeah. So I'll start while we decide who's going to answer first. I'll just answer. I feel like the biggest part of that, is an emphasis on good public process and public participation and hearing from people what is important. The data, which is part of the information that we use, may be very similar. Like a good example was, hey, it looks like the numbers are different, but the growth patterns between Raymond and Wyndham are very similar. Or maybe, hey, the lakes issues that Raymond has are likely to be very similar to Naples or Gray. But I think that what will set this plan apart and the recommendations apart will be what we hear from the people in this town. And it's not a one-size-fits-all. You will experience issues around water quality or traffic differently than even a town next door or a town of a similar size in the same region. So I think that one of the things that we, were forced to do due to COVID, but have really, I think, led the way and expanded our practices, what Kate was talking about, where, we're not just relying on the 20 people that show up to the meeting on a weekday night in a room like this. It's thinking about that approach of like, who do we need to hear from, and keeping track of who we've heard from and who we haven't heard from yet, and how do we go to where those people are if they can't come to us. And sometimes that's online, sometimes it's a YouTube video that we try and make sure people see, or sometimes it's setting up something at a Little League game or something at the voting, the polling locations, so there's different strategies around reaching a broad group of people in town. And I think what we've done the last few years, and we did provide some websites and some YouTube links and those kinds of things in our proposal to give you a bit of a sampling of how that can work, from, a full-on project website to, a 37-second video that, is saying, hey, check out the draft plan, or come, if you can't make it to the meeting, fill out the online survey, those kinds of things. And those are the kinds of comments and values that I think are going to make this plan relevant to the people and the policymakers in Raymond. Having, there could very well be some issues that you have in common with some neighboring communities, but like I said, there could be things you have maybe more in common with some other town in a completely different part of the state. So we want to take some of the techniques that we've been working on and come up with the right mix for Raymond, so that we're hearing from a broader range of people as possible.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of covered it, but I was just going to say that I think that, like Ben said, it's all about a lot of that public participation. There are a lot of regional issues that impact Raymond and the rest of the Lakes region. There are also a lot of issues that, you see kind of all across Maine: housing affordability, the pressure and new development for housing versus rural areas, and these kinds of issues. But each town kind of has a different perspective to how they want to deal with it, and making sure that when we have this robust public process, that we're hearing from the people who are actually living in these areas that we're talking about, and getting a wide view from the community. And that really differentiates each town does have a unique perspective on how they feel comfortable approaching these issues, what kind of interventions they want to take, how hands-off they want to be, that kind of thing.
Just follow another question. With regard to zoning and codes and regulations, it's a moving target. It's always changing. There was a lot of talk at the last meeting about LD 2003. There's hundreds of bills that have been proposed for this new session. How do you keep up with the changes that are happening concurrently with the plan? And how do you advise towns on these regulations that may not have any precedent, may not have been applied practically, but we have to make a plan that impacts the next 10 years?
That's a great question. And I think in part it's not knowable what the legislature might do a couple sessions from now.
Right.
And I think a good example is LD 2003, a couple of years ago. I don't know that was on anybody's radar. and now communities around the state are still trying to figure out what this is going to mean. And there's still rulemaking happening, and I think some of the bills that I've seen are trying to fix or address unintended consequences or clarify some things around LD 2003, for example. So more directly, to answer your question, I think a big part of this process is, again, at that highest level, reaffirming the vision for the community and the values of the community, and those will set broad policy goals so that no matter what kinds of specific new tools might become available, or what maybe you could look at it as new restrictions on how communities deal with these challenges, you've got a solid foundation to lean on in knowing what kind of approaches are going to be workable in town. So you will know coming out of this process, hopefully, what people are going to have an appetite. Like, how far could you go in certain areas, given the values of the community and the priorities of the community. So it may not say, there will be specific recommendations, but there will also be, a little deeper than that, things that you can lean on, when it comes time to acting on these things 3, 4, or 5 years from now that we may not foresee when the plan's adopted.
Thank you very much. Those are both very helpful.
Jackie.
All right, so I'm kind of curious in some of the more recent research that you've been doing, looking at data and, the beginning parts of the plan here. Are you seeing trends in kind of this post-COVID world that are different than what you've seen kind of prior to 2020? Are there things that need further consideration that, not to say that anything that's currently, we might have seen in the past 2 years will continue for 20 years, but just kind of, has that weighed in at all on the impacts or the consideration for any of the research that you guys are doing?
Yeah, well, I think since the pandemic, we've had first of all, we had this 2020 census that had some issues with the data. So when we're doing planning work, there's been some discrepancies between the 2020 census, the 2021 ACS data, which has, in our recent experience, kind of made it like you kind of have to ground truth some of these numbers a little bit more, especially because I think I heard there was a NPR Maine calling thing about Maine's changing demographics, that Maine is one of the states that experienced the most in-migration during the pandemic in the past few years. So I think that it's definitely trying to find the most up-to-date data, and also looking at the ways that sort of where people are people working remotely also using seasonal homes and vacation homes in a different way than they would before, where they're maybe spending more time in a second home and working from there for part of the year. So I think we've definitely seen in a lot of different communities how the pandemic has changed the way that they're getting more people in, some communities are getting more families, where they were seeing a decline in that previously, and more remote workers. And yeah, it's sort of a tricky data point at this point because we're still so fresh in it. So that's something that we've been working with in a couple communities, is trying to figure out the best way to kind of establish those trends.
I think one of the things that we saw, I was on a panel last 2 years ago in Vermont, the regional planning conference, where we were talking about northern New England specifically, and the COVID boom that many small communities were seeing, and trying to make sense of, is this a blip? are the people who have a ski condo just hanging out in the summertime when they otherwise wouldn't, or are they going to be here? You know, and we saw a lot of smaller communities with school enrollment that went up, and I think it's we'll have to see if the, you know, people who move to Maine and New Hampshire and Vermont from other states are going to stick around and make this their home, or if this was a temporary situation. One thing that seems to also be happening is that there's a much higher percentage of people working remotely. So people who live in Maine and work in their house for a company located somewhere else. And that phenomenon is pretty widespread. I don't know exactly what that looks like here in Raymond, but statewide, that is a real thing. And it's led to conversations at local level and at state level about what, you know, adequate internet connectivity to enable this to continue. And the implications of that, not only on, you know, seeing crowded grocery stores in times of year when you might not expect to see such crowded grocery stores, but also around housing affordability and, you know, places that had been maybe more seasonal rentals or vacant times of the year are now fully occupied, like Kate had said earlier. And I think the final thing is, in many communities, the Airbnb short-term rental scenario is a very big impact in town, and I've seen it in coastal communities and lake communities and mountain communities, you know, vacation type destinations. So that also has an impact not only on you know, what you experience for traffic and community, but I think it has, like, my point is it's a bigger impact on neighborhoods. You know, when you don't have people living in that home year round and you know who your neighbors are, you're dealing with situations where it's someone different every weekend. And there have been places, and it'd be interesting to hear your experience in Raymond, where it's led to a sense of like a loss of community. There've been some big changes around community character related to, you know, certain parts of town becoming, you know, a lot of small hotels essentially.
And I guess, and this, I have got another question here, but as far as, you know, once a planner starts this whole process, what does it look like practically for us as a committee working with a planner, you know, and what is it that you need from a committee throughout the process?
And can I just say, what are the committee's blind spots? Because I think that goes along with Jackie's question too.
Yeah, and this, you know, we had a few questions that we wanted to pose to you as well, time permitting, but I think that one of the things to clarify is the role of the committee in regard to the writing and the drafting of the plan. There are some communities where, you know, every committee member, I should say, has a chapter that they're in charge of. Other communities will say, look, drafting a plan by committee sounds like no fun at all. We want the planner to draft this, and we'll provide high-level, you know, comments and guidance and kind of steer the project. But the role of the committee in that case is to make sure that the plan stays true to the public input, and make sure that you know, the role of the committee is that, you know, really to make sure that we're hearing from the people that we need to hear from in town, and less about doing the research or doing the drafting. So that's something that I don't know if the 2004 plan experience helped shape where you are at this point, but I think we'd be curious to hear about your expectations for general approach to work. I think it's a little too early to talk about workflow and that kind of stuff, but our preference, frankly, our experience is more on, getting good input and guidance from a committee, and less about, drafting a plan in meetings like this.
All right. I just got a couple of quick ones. This will be an easy one. We did a preliminary survey of the community at the last town election in November, I believe. And surprise to me, well, we got quite a response. Over 90 individuals that were actually stopped and did a quick survey for us on what their their highest priorities were as far as the community going forward. And I know this will be a surprise to you, but one of the things that came up very clear was we'd like to see increased services and low taxes. So I was just wondering if you've had experience in solving that or giving guidance.
No, I don't know anyone who's like figured that dichotomy out, but I will say there are a lot of communities we work in where it's not the mill rate per se, but it's the value for the services that they get. Some towns have a relatively high mill rate, but they're very satisfied with the plowing, public safety. They've got a great library, and they're happy to pay taxes for that level of service. And in other communities, they identify, whether their perceived tax burden is high or low. They're like, we really want a library that does more things, or we need our response times better, or we need to make sure that our sidewalks are cleared within a day of the storm, kind of thing. And they might be happy to have a conversation about paying more for that if they could get the things that they're valuing. So I think it's not necessarily always about how much the tax bill is. It's more, I think, at least in part, about the value of the services that they're getting, the perceived value of the services they're getting for that tax. So that's often, how we end up talking about that. And in some places, that is one of the things that rise right to the top. That is the core value of their community. They're very proud of their affordability, and they are okay with not having their own library, or they're okay with getting to the sidewalks when they get to the sidewalks, kind of thing. And that's something that every community needs to figure out on their own.
Just one other question, or just I guess we have access to a St. Joseph's student intern, and how would you utilize that individual in this process?
Yeah, well, I think it would depend on the students' interests and sort of like what subject areas they're interested in, but I could see them, and of course when they're available to start, but I could see them helping with the research process on one of the inventory chapters, especially like they're an environmental science student, put them on some of those natural resource chapters. That could be really helpful. In my experience working with interns, I also love to have them on some of the online outreach, social media, kind of developing things like that, because the younger people are, the better they are at making good internet posts. So those are some of the ways that I think, and I think it could be helpful for a student to get some exposure to how the public process works, as well as the more research side of things.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to answer it, is oftentimes the internships are really focused on developing a student's interest, and kind of they need to get as much out of it as they're giving to a project. So I'd like to, depending on their background and interest, public participation is going to be a focus, I think, of a project like this. There's a strong research component to it. There could be also topical components, whether it's transportation or climate or public policy that might be a natural tie-in with the student's background. So that's probably how I would approach it as well. Just kind of let's see who it is and what they're interested in and where they're most excited about jumping in.
Great, thanks. Don, any questions from the municipal side?
Well, most of my questions have now been asked, but I guess I've got a real simple one. You both were municipal planners for some period of time, and so you come into a new town, and you're charged with helping maybe the planning board, other boards and committees develop ordinances. So you look at the plan and you say, what's a good thing? What's the most important thing, the best thing that we should be seeking to accomplish with our plan? And then also, what don't you like to see in a plan? As a staff person, you come in, you got the plan. What helps, what doesn't help?
Yeah, I think a clarity and specificity in the plan is most helpful. Vision statements can provide a lot of guidance, and they can provide a lot of specific guidance for staff and policymakers, but I've also seen a lot of vision statements that are, mom and apple pie, and, just we have a great town and we all love each other and it's going to be this way forever. And as nice as that is, and it's probably easy to get consensus on things like that, it makes it really hard to say, boy, how do we change our zoning based on that? Or how do we make a capital plan for the transportation project based on that? So I think tying the vision statement to the ground through the future land use plan, so that you can say, in these parts of town, we want to see these kinds of things happen, and in these parts of town, they're going to be different. So in some places, they'll be quiet and serene and be very similar to the way they are now in 20 years. In other places, we want to see more energy, more activity, and more investment, so that in 10 or 15 years, it'll look different. So that is number one, relying on the vision statement of future land use plan to provide some real actionable guidance.
And therefore, the vision statement comes really later on in the process, because we're going to be collecting the opinions of a number of different groups and within the community, correct? We can't formulate a vision until we know what the community is really looking for.
Exactly. I think that we have proposed getting that research part of the project out and complete, and then having a community meeting and some other input for people to provide that space for people to tell us their visions. And the fun part of this work is really trying to find the consensus and then identify those places where additional discussion is needed. And there will be, like I said, some recommendations to update a open space plan or do a climate plan. They're recommendations to plan for planning kind of thing. But I think that there's also going to be, if you can be, the more guidance you can provide in the plan, the more direct and actionable the recommendations are going to be.
Yeah, you kind of covered it, but to answer Don's question, when I started working as a planner in Topsom, they had a fresh comprehensive plan. So we were going straight into implementation. So the things that you really want to see from the municipal side are, does this plan have an implementation section that if there's going to be a implementation committee, that we can kind of turn into a spreadsheet and figure out who's doing what when? That's something really awesome that you want to see. The kind of vision and future land use ideas that are sort of specific and real enough that if we get a controversial development coming to the town, can we actually look at the comprehensive plan and see how that fits in with how the town's vision has been written? And I guess sort of the caveats are just the opposite of that. You don't want things that are to have something that is maybe so vague or so far off in the future that it doesn't set up realistic goals and expectations that the municipal government can use.
Go ahead.
I guess I'll ask one more. And so Greg likes the town meeting, and everybody has some shared values. I think environmental protection is going to be, resource protection, those sorts of things are, paramount concern, always have been, always will be in the town of Raymond. So everybody's got their other little issues. My other little issues, and I've been working, as you may know, for the past half dozen years or so on the idea of getting broadband internet, universal broadband internet for the Lakes region. So I wanted to just ask you about that. And then another lesser one that is on my mind is sustainability, and that hasn't really done much here in Raymond. I have brought the solar, idea a couple, 3 times to the Board of Selectmen. We haven't, yet decided that that's something we want to do. But I'm very interested in those two things, and, to future-proof the town, and I think the pandemic has shown us that people, value quality of place, quality of life, and they want to live in places like the Lakes region, like Raymond. And so I think it's of the greatest importance that we get those two things, particularly broadband. And then I think just for the sake of the future and the planet, I'm not going to get into the argument about global warming, yes or no, but sustainability is an important thing, I think. I just wanted to get your thoughts on those.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take sustainability and I'll give you broadband. How about that?
Good.
Yeah, I think that the comp plan is a really good opportunity to look at sustainability kind of in this really holistic way, as it touches everything from transportation to how we use land to natural resources, recreation, open space, and it gives you an opportunity to look at it not just in a sort of very prescriptive, and I guess in a way, what I'm trying to say is in a way where we can look at it, how can, we do something that is good for the environment, that also will maybe save the town money on energy bills, save the citizens money by, not having to increase taxes, and also make the quality of life better, whether it's looking at something like making the town's streetlights or heating more energy efficient, or looking at different ways that pedestrian infrastructure can be improved that makes people's lives better, and is also a sustainable initiative. So I think that's something that we definitely like to incorporate in all these different topics as we're going through the plan.
When it comes to broadband in particular, there's been a number of folks for the last maybe 10 years who've been working at a local level. There's a number of municipal broadband networks established in Maine, and a number of broader regional things. I do recall the Lakes Region Initiative. I've been working with Tom Bartel in Wyndham on that. And with the county and neighboring communities like Raymond and Gray. And I've come to believe that it's really a piece of 21st century infrastructure, just as important as water and sewer is. It is infrastructure that will be provided at some point everywhere. I think that aligning, this kind of goes to a larger comment too about how, there is a state broadband authority, there is a broadband plan, and our work at a municipal level and in various places where we work has been in large part finding ways to align with those larger plans, those higher level state plans. Because that is often a way, we'd ask about funding and how to make things happen. If you can align your sustainability goals with the Maine Won't Wait Climate Action Plan, you will find greater success. If you can align your broadband strategy with the existing programs and grants that are being established through the State Broadband Authority, you will find greater traction than if you were to come up with a strategy on your own or different from what the state was recommending. So I think part of our perspective, and this is maybe, somewhat an advantage to having worked in a community and now work as a planning consultant, is that you have that perspective to you know, kind of get out of the municipal trenches and see how the things that are happening at the local level align with state and federal programs to help, not only from an implementation standpoint, but part of the implementation is finding the funds to do that. So I think that's going to be an important consideration when it comes to certain aspects of this plan. You know, in what ways do these priorities align with some of the state policies and the state goals around these subject topics?
Chris, any questions?
Well, most of the questions have been answered, but I guess I'd like to share a couple of my thoughts that you had brought up. The Airbnbs are going to be an issue if they're not already. They can be disruptive to communities like you spoke of. We have had several developers from out of state that actually come in, buy a lot on a lake, and build an Airbnb specifically for that purpose. In the past, I had seen that, you know, people would do that just to supplement their income for a few weeks in the summer. But we're seeing people actually come into town to do this specifically, and it's not just seasonally, it's year-round. So that's something that I would just let you know that that's going to be one of the pressures that we're going to have to deal with. One of my other things that I think we're going to need to discuss, and I don't know how you do this, but there is going to be more growth pressure because Wyndham's filling up and other towns are moving, you know, the growth is just moving north, and we're the next town in line. And I think this comprehensive plan committee and your planning expertise is going to be key for us to figure out where we have that growth and how we protect our lakes, streams, our mountains from that development, but also have that rural character. It's a puzzle, and it's going to be a very challenging to make this work so that our future, I mean, we all live here and play here, and we want to be here. And we're very excited to be on this committee. This is a very, very talented group of people and very diverse. And it's nice to see you two here and hear your expertise. And obviously, Ben, you and I have worked together quite a bit in the town of Wyndham, and even before I was in Wyndham, we were working on the broadband thing with Dawn and a few other things. One of my things that I thought was important to this committee that I brought up, and hasn't been spoke of tonight, is infrastructure and basically the transportation piece of that. I know that we've talked for almost 10 or 12 years of having some kind of a connector from Wyndham through Raymond, and I think that's something that maybe something that we want to look at that would maybe address some of our growth, some of our issues with jobs. I think that job growth is very minimal here in town. We have some big industries, but not many. We have Sabre Yachts, and we have SPX or Dielectric, but we don't have any big employers. People come here to work and play on the lakes. You know, tourism is the big thing, and what I've seen in my lifetime is the increased pressure on the lakes, the volume of boats, the volume of kayakers and people recreating in our community. It's great, but it also comes at a cost. And I think that balance with, you know, trying to find that balance is key to this committee.
Don?
He brings up a really great point with the, depending on how you look at it, you know, the bypass, or would be, I guess, how Wyndham might look at it, but I look at it as an opportunity corridor. And so we don't have a lot of available land for commercial development. So Chris has talked to me about that. You know, I think a big issue for a lot of people, I mean, it's not all recreating on the lakes, there's a lot of that, but there's also the idea of some level of local employment and sustainability from a job standpoint. So, you know, we don't want to, you know, spoil the character of the town or change it in a, you know, manifest way, but I think to have zones, if possible, given our limited land mass, zones that would be suitable for development, for jobs, and a more commercial or, sort of land use, I guess. We don't really have a great deal of that. Wyndham has it in spades, but, maybe that's enough, but I look at the land that would be on that, when we were talking with the school about the possibility of locating the school up on top of a mountain with a beautiful view, in the wrong town, however, but it's right on the border. It's the lot that, borders the right town. And so that's a beautiful piece of land, and it encompasses parts of Wyndham and Gray and Raymond, and that would be right on that corridor, and so it's something that I would like to, he brought it up initially, and I'm very excited about that possibility for that land.
Great. Yes. So I guess last but not least, Sue, any questions?
No, not really. Thank you, though.
Okay. All right. So you have, who did I miss?
Frank said he might want to say something
Frank,
later.
did you have any other questions?
You covered it with sustainability.
Sustainability. All right, I guess for the sake of time and trying to keep this within the 2 hours, what I'd say is at this point, you said Ben, you might have some questions for us.
Well, we did have a few questions. If we're out of time, I appreciate your restrictions.
Quick and easy would be
rapid fire round.
Did you want to
Get started.
Okay. Well, I think my first question was really about getting back to that idea of growth, and not only the residential growth that I had found in that quick preview of the census data that was in the PowerPoint slide, but I think it also relates to the type of infrastructure that Don and Chris are talking about with, a new road. And I understand it's in the vicinity of, Route 302 commercial activity and not too far from the village and going out 85. So, there are, I think discussions to be had in the community about, is that an appropriate place for new infrastructure? And if it is, what kind of land uses would be, desirable in that area, and how would they be compatible with the things that are already happening in the area? So I think that that's a specific example of the more general, how should growth be viewed in Raymond? Is it the kind of thing that would be welcomed in certain places, or is there a sense in the community that, growth should be more measured or restricted in general?
Well, I think that my understanding of LD 2003 is that they're actually looking at, or it's incorporated in that legislation, is identifying, along with the land management or the growth management plan, which has been around for quite a while, was identifying areas for growth within the town. So my guess is that through this process and looking at 2003, that we will be looking at that and necessarily having to identify those areas. Once again, that's going to be in collaboration with the planning board and ordinance changes and the like, but that's my sense of it.
So it's kind of a bit of, make sure that we really minimize the impact of growth in certain places, but it could be okay in other places, and not just like across the board.
Yeah, my son Penn is that you don't. Whenever I cringe whenever I heard, we need to control growth. And my understanding is that control is the problem there. You really can't. A lot of it's the market, and that's what determines growth. Managing it is what I believe has always been the goal, is how do you manage it? So similar to getting on with, how do we increase services and keep taxes low? Right. That's always a conundrum, and how do you get that balance? And from my understanding in this process, we're going to be relying on the citizens of Raymond to tell us that.
That's the thing. Everybody's going to have an opinion about it, and it's going to vary, I think, in this committee and across the town. And so the first step here is to have that discussion, see what comes out of it, and then go from there.
Yeah.
I'm just expressing my concern, but it may or may not be shared.
Yeah, I don't know that we can't not grow. I believe that's a given. We're going to grow. It's how do we do it, right?
You know, I will have conversations with folks, with communities, like initial early, and say, you know, you're part of a regional housing market, you're part of a regional job market, and there are certain things. There's a national economy that, you know, will dictate a lot of what's going on, but there are certain things that you can control, and I think that that's really what a comprehensive plan is about. It's a land use plan. It's trying to determine what you do have control over, try and shape the future of the community, knowing that there are a lot of things that, and a lot of individual decisions that are going to be beyond the town office's control.
The other thing that really hasn't been discussed that I guess we touched on a little bit in the beginning, and I guess it was me who touched on that, was the whole affordable housing thing. You know, I think that's of great significance to our town, and you know, I'm sure you're aware of strategies that we are not aware of that could help to promote, I guess, improving our diversity of our population, our demographics, having more younger people, more working people.
Yep.
And it seems to me that it's all interrelated, right? I mean, if you want to have affordable housing, well, you know, are people going to be able to commute? Are we a bedroom or evolving into a bedroom community of Portland and Lewiston, Auburn? What's the trend going to be in 10 years as far as how many individuals here are going to be working from home? That ties into the broadband. If we're going to develop the affordable housing, you know, let's say we're going to expand the village area, well, there's got to be resources there. There's got to be stores. There's got to be sidewalks. There's got to be transportation. I mean, all those things seem to be interrelated into a plan. And as I understand it, we're trying to look 10, 15, 20 years down the road. You know, some things I think are more easy to vision than others. It's kind of hard for me to believe that reducing electric costs by taking it from the sun seems like something that's not going to go away anytime soon.
When I first came here 23 years ago, you know, the town was, I think somebody talked, I think it was Peter talked about the poll where people want to have the best of services and the lowest of taxes, and it makes me think of a discussion we had back then, and you know, I was trying to be provocative, as is my nature, but I said, you know, we have to decide whether we're the outer ring of Greater Portland or Greater Otisfield, and I think that we're Greater Portland, and so I appreciate the idea that we want to have the low taxes, and we have had historically the lowest taxes around, and I mean that's because of our robust valuation, our conservative values. But we also want to have all these cutting-edge things, and we have a lot of those things. We have a lot of those things to a degree and kind that towns like Windham don't have, in the technology area, for instance, probably. And we had that for a long, long time, but we've done it in a sort of homegrown way. So that's kind of the Raymond, you know, beautiful environment, low taxes. We want to have everything that everybody has to the east of us. I don't think we're the outer ring of Greater Otisfield.
Gotcha.
That's my own opinion.
Yep.
Well, thank you. I think for the sake of time, we're going to move on, and we do very much appreciate your presentation. And I'll go on record. I did at the last meeting as well. This is excellent. I mean, this is very comprehensive, no pun intended, and professional, well organized, and a great marketing tool.
Great job. We appreciate the conversation. I think that this is the kind of thing that kind of keeps me going as a professional, like hearing from folks with a wide range of interests, and like you said, trying to like tie some of these things together into those cross-cutting, high priority, impactful goals. Yeah,
excellent.
So thank you.
Thank you. All right, I know that we have an applicant that's on. I'd like to get him on board here first, if we could. Derek Ray, hopefully you got a chance to see the application in the e-packet. If not, it was, I have a copy here and I can read it if anybody wants. It's really 4 questions and they're very, very succinctly answered. Does anybody need that at all, or?
Give it a quick read.
All right, I'll give it a quick read. This is the application.
That's cool.
This is Derek Ray. He's from 15 Ball Drive. His occupation is real estate and builder. The boards and committees he's interested in. Number 1 was the Comprehensive Plan Committee. Number 2 is the Planning Board, and number 3 was the Zoning Board of Appeals. Why are you interested in the board or the committee chosen above? I would like to be a part of the planning and growth of the town while keeping the integrity of the town intact. What contributions, benefits, talents, and skills can you bring to the town of Raymond? I've been in the real estate and construction fields for over 20 years. What do you feel is the responsibility of the boards and/or committees you chose? To help the town grow and change in a positive way, but also keeping the community aspect of the town from changing. Does your schedule allow the flexibility to attend meetings on a regular basis? And the answer was yes. So do we have Derek? Can he zoom in?
Yes, I believe I'm zoomed in.
All right, Derek, so I'll turn it over to the board for any specific questions.
Derek, you're a brave soul to want to join the CompPlan. I mean, you just experienced probably one of the more informative meetings we've had to date. But that was good if you were able to listen in to what you're up against, and we welcome the opportunity to talk with you some more. And do you have any questions for us here, looking at us?
It's not.
So,
Derek, you're muted in case you're trying to speak.
There he
I
is.
think I'm back. All right. Let me know if that goes out again. I don't know. I'm trying to do it on my phone. My daughter's in a cheering practice, so I'm in the parking lot listening and watching you guys, but I can't get the video to work. I tried on the laptop, so here I am with that. That was a great meeting, though. I like the interview process. Got some good questions. Those people seem on top of it and done it before. A lot of knowledge there, so I think that helps. And then I was able to text in a couple questions to some people that were there, so that was good. And that's about it. I mean, I don't know how the other meetings have gone, but very well organized, to the point. There wasn't a lot of off-topic rambling. It was pretty good. I like that.
Derek, I'm just going to have this observation, and it's this. First of all, echoing John as far as, we really appreciate volunteerism. It's not something that you can capture a lot these days, and so anybody willing to step up for the betterment of their community and sacrifice their free time for any of the committees or boards, I'm very appreciative of. That being said, here's my concern, and it has to do with the makeup of a committee that is tasked, as you heard tonight, with land use ordinances and development. And that the state guidelines in how this comprehensive plan committee is put together says that the committee should be diversified enough to represent the community. And so my concern is the process would go from here, where we review your application, ask you questions, and then make a recommendation one way or another, or decide to make a recommendation to the select board, because understand it's the select board that appoints the members of this committee. I would just say, and I heard it tonight, I believe, from Dawn, that one of the exceptional parts of this committee is the diversity. So we have men, we have women, we have old, and we have young. We have individuals that are for more regulation. We have individuals that are for less regulation. All of these things are good because they meet the basic premise of what a comprehensive plan should be, which is to be representative of the community. My concern is if I go around the room in this committee, what I find is we have a forester, we have a geologist, we have a healthcare provider, we have an educational administrator, we have a financial advisor, we have an attorney, and if I understand it correctly, we have 3 individuals that are either directly or indirectly involved in real estate. So right now, 30% of this committee is represented by realtors. And so that's my concern. It is not that I don't believe we should not be looking to embrace anyone that wants to serve on the town committees. And I'm gratified to see that you're also interested in the planning board. And I don't know that there is a realtor. No. There is not a realtor on the planning board. I don't know if there's a realtor on the zoning board of appeals. There really should be. We draw from our internal expertise in those areas. So that's my primary concern to the committee. And understand that recommending you as a member will then go to the select board. When we had the discussion at last month's meeting, we had determined that we actually weren't going to have an interview. We were going to skip that step. And that was something that afterwards, in conversation with Kayla, the co-chair, what we determined is that our reasoning, and it was actually my reasoning, to skip over this phase was faulty. What we had said at the meeting was none of us had to go through an interview process. But understand, this was a new committee. It was the selectmen that appointed us. But now there is a committee. And therefore, what we decided, Kayla and myself, is, in all fairness, we needed to go back and actually conduct this interview and make a recommendation, because that's the process to go to the select board. So those are my views. I figured I would just express that. And, you know, it's not hard with a committee of 10 right now to figure if there are 3 individuals on this committee that are either directly or indirectly involved with a sale of land in the town of Raymond, that might be viewed as the appearance of a conflict, because it represents now, realtors represent 30% of this committee. If, quite honestly, had I been involved earlier on in the selectmen's choice, I probably would have said, no. You know, once again, we're hopeful that what the select board did is thoughtfully looked at all the applications. So it may very well be that our recommendation going to the select board will be, they'll say, well, yeah, 40% of the committee being realtors is okay. I have my doubts about that, but I have no knowledge beforehand that that's the case. So I just wanted to make that statement. Does anyone have any other comments?
Well, I wonder if we might, I know Derek, he's a neighbor of mine, and realtor is one of the many hats that he wears. And I wonder if he might share with us some of the other businesses that he's involved with, so we can get a more comprehensive understanding of his skill set and his experience in the town of Raymond.
I think that's an excellent query. Derek?
I think I'm unmuted again. I'm a part-time real estate agent. I do it basically for my own friends and family, and then my own personal properties. But I put that on there as just, you know, I was putting all the things that I do on there just so that everybody would be aware of the things that I have, and the many hats that I wear, as well as I have, you know, some storage unit businesses. I do development, and then I also, I would say takes up the most of my time would be building. So I'm a general contractor by trade. So, I mean, that's kind of with all those hats on a comprehensive plan for the town, I have 3 children that I'm raising that are young in this town. Volunteer quite a bit on the coaching and the sports aspect of it. So I mean, as wearing every single one of those hats, I just think that it's a good spot to be on when you're coming up with a plan for the future of the town that I'm planning on living in and raising my kids in for the entire future. I think all those hats benefit it. Just because one of those hats is worn by a couple other members on there, I'm not sure if that's a huge deterrent, but maybe it is for the selectmen or for you guys. I mean, is when if I were to vote or to give an input, I need to give that. I would be giving that as a developer, a builder, real estate, father, kids in sports, all of those hats. I think I'd be wearing when I came in to vote or to give my. Sorry, my daughter's getting in now. But I would be, interpreting some of the stuff that's going on and giving my input with all those hats, not just one.
All right, thank you, Derek. Any other questions for Derek?
Hey, a quick question. Just, I think you made a comment, Pete, that some of the other boards that were hiring, so to speak, and the pay is great, Derek, did not have any contractor experience members, I'll say, or people with Derek's skill set. And certainly on the planning board, that's certainly a valuable thing to have. And in the past, there's typically been a builder or two to help bring reality to rules that are being made at the planning board level. So just quickly from you, Derek, did you have a preference of those committees? Was any of them ahead of the others? Apparently the comp plan was rising to the top, but did you have a strong feeling about planning board or what was the other one, appeals board?
Zoning Board of Appeals.
Board of Appeals.
Yeah, I think on that I put it in the order, of most importance to me, I feel, for my family and the community. I think those, in that order that I put it in was the order that I would wish to, to volunteer at, but I'm up for all 3 or none or one. It's kind of, I'm up to the mercy of you guys at that point, but I do want to get more involved, so.
Great.
All right. Any other questions for Derek? No?
Brad's got a quick one.
Brad?
And so does Sean.
Oh, good.
Thank you, Peter, for raising the issue. It's a sensitive issue to bring up, and I appreciate you as a co-chair raising that issue. I do share that concern that you brought up, and I also would just like to ask a couple of questions. What experience do you have in serving in volunteer organizations, on boards, on committees, leadership in those, if you wouldn't mind, Derek?
Yeah, sure. 0. The only boards that I've been involved with would be sports, youth programs, and things of that nature. This would be the first one that I'm, that's why I put in there for those. Just trying to be, I've been established in Raymond for a while, and I feel, it's kind of my duty as a father and also as a businessman in this town and a resident to be able to volunteer at some level on here and kind of hopefully shape the town to where our family likes it. And that's basically it. I don't have any more expertise in these. I mean, I think I'm not necessarily young anymore, but I am, you got to start somewhere. So I think being just turning 40, I think it's time to get involved in these. So that's where I'm at.
Good.
Thank you.
Peter?
All right, Sean?
Just real quick, Derek, I just was kind of curious, as a kind of developer, are you currently developing anything, or do you have any recent builds or anything? And the reason I was asking is if you feel our process as the town is kind of conducive to growth, or do you feel that's kind of, is there a hindrance? And I'm not sure if you're developing anything right now, but can you speak on that a little bit? Just kind of curious.
Yeah, I have 2 developments going. I have a 9 lot in Naples and also a 9 lot in Raymond. and it kind of was interesting bringing up the point earlier of the open space, because I have a cluster subdivision that is going in Raymond right now, and I kind of lean towards that. I like the idea of keeping that open space. We have a 40-acre subdivision, and most of those lots are between 1 acre and 2 acres, and then there's a large community common area space with trails, hunting, walking, ATV, bike riding, all that. And I lean towards that. I kind of like that idea. It's beneficial, I think, to keep some of that woods and the deer and wildlife and everything in those areas. Let them live along with us instead of kind of spreading it out. I grew up in Poland, and they have some farm and forest areas that are minimum 5-acre lots, and it kind of breaks things out so much that you don't have those big chunks anymore, because everybody's got to do their 5s, and they have this, and they have an outbuilding here, and it just kind of pushes some of that wildlife in some of those areas. It just keeps pushing them away and away out of the town instead of kind of leaving some spots for them to survive as well. But that's just my opinion on that. It just doesn't matter, I guess, with the rest of the town. Go with what they agree on and what they're kind of leaning towards. But as far as, being in the business and being a builder and a developer with that was my favorite way to go. I thought it was pretty beneficial for both parties.
Cool. Well, I appreciate your input as a builder, so thank you for that.
Frank?
Peter?
Frank?
Thank you. Want to compliment you for being willing to stick your neck out and join committees. We are always looking for members for our committees because we don't have enough people willing to put in the time and the effort in order to serve on them. But I agree with Peter in that I don't want this committee to go through, make the plan, put it in effect, and then have people criticize us because they feel that it was overrepresented by one group or the other. I'd like to stay away from that if we can do that. I would love to see you serving on a committee, but I'm not necessarily believing that this is a particular committee you should be on just because you are presently in real estate.
Any other comments? No, and I just want to reiterate, my sense is this one. As far as the applicant is concerned, my guess is that if the applicant had applied to the select board, as we all did when we were first forming the committee, there's every chance in the world that the select board would have said yes. That being said, it now falls to us through the process to basically make a recommendation to the select board. Make no mistake about it. This is not our final decision. It's the select board's decision. Our decision is whether or not to recommend it to the select board. So that being said, if there's no other questions, then I would make a motion to approve now this applicant with a recommendation to go forward to the select board for appointment. All those in favor? 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Opposed? 2. So okay, yeah. So it's it carries with a vote of 7. So the recommendation is that this applicant, we will bring this application to the select board for a decision. Sue, can you make that happen?
Yes, I will. I will tell you that the select board isn't meeting in February, so the meeting will be, I believe, it's March 14th. And Derek, I'll include you on the agenda when your application is up for consideration.
All right, Derek, we're all set? You're going to go to the select board for approval or denial?
Best of luck, Derek.
Thank you, Derek.
All right.
Thank you guys very much.
You're welcome. So I will ask this. It's 8:35 or 8:34. I would ask either the board, the committee to decide we could go another half hour to complete this agenda or make more of a dent in it, or we can vote to carry the rest of the business on to the next meeting. So I guess I need a motion one way or the other.
I would like to at least carry old business,
All right.
because that stuff can wait, in my opinion, and, you know, I mean,
So
maybe quick.
if I understand, Caleb, what you'd like to do is have the discussion about North Star planning,
I would.
and then we can just do you want to do the community association outreach opportunities as well? No, we can carry that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thought is, besides setting the next meeting date, obviously giving the public a chance to doing the, you know, those small things.
All right.
Personally, I would like to carry the old business, and I guess that would be D.
So if I understand, Caleb's motion would be that we finish the business tonight with the committee discussion on the North Star planning, and next meeting date, public comment, committee member comment, and adjourn.
Yes.
All right. Do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion?
I have a discussion point here.
Brad?
Yes. I'm in favor of carrying forward just because of the hour and what's before us. I'm also in favor of a conversation with the board to just learn more about the RFP process. And I'd like to see that happen before next month. Like to know where the RFP went, what, if any, feedback we got, and the follow-up that we did on that, so that we know what we're up against. Is there only one applicant for us to vote on when we vote, or are there others?
Yeah, so Brad, we can have that discussion. You can have that discussion in committee member comments.
Okay.
All right? Okay. All right, so
this motion won't defer committee member comments, correct?
I believe we
Correct.
included it in the motion.
Correct.
The comments, committee comments would take place. All right, so there's no more discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. All right, so next on the agenda is the committee discussion on the presentation for North Star Planning interview, and I'll open it up to the committee.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I mean, we had one applicant, and I feel fortunate that went really well. I felt as though prepared, competent. I think that as far they're open to us. It didn't, they didn't seem like we were scary to them. I think we could develop a good working relationship. I personally think it would be a good idea to move forward.
I think you said it perfectly.
Yeah, you did.
I'll second Kayla's statement.
Any other comments? Brad?
Yeah, can I just get a show of hands again? How many have been on one or more strategic or comprehensive plan committees, led them, whatever, in the past 20 years? How many?
Are you when you say strategic plan, what do you mean by that?
A strategic plan would be, comprehensive plans are typically municipalities, nonprofit organizations, for-profit organizations would typically have a strategic plan. That's how it's referred to.
All right. So I'm going to put myself in that. I've been involved in strategic plans.
Strategic planning, yeah.
Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us. How many have been on 2 or more over the past 20 years? So we have 1, 2, 3. And how many have been on 3 or more over the past 20 years?
1, 2, 3,
4?
4.
5?
Yeah, we'll say.
Call it 5.
Yeah, we'll say half the committee has that experience.
Okay, and how many have led those? How many have led one?
Am I including the planning board?
Yeah, absolutely.
One. How many have led 2?
2.
How many have led 3?
Brad, is there a purpose to this? Where are you going?
Because if you're experienced in strategic planning and the process of interviewing, one of the most important parts, there are 2 critical parts that we should really discuss here. One is the competition in terms of bidding. I'm not going to get into that right now. The other is what you learn from interviewing multiple planners. Whether or not you're going to hire them, what we can learn from interviewing multiple planners. And this community is, in my judgment, being shortchanged if we don't have an understanding of what the bidding process was and are there any other options to consider. That's not at all anything against this group of planners. It is that there are a lot of very capable planners here in the state, and I think we owe it to the community, and I hope everyone on this committee feels similarly, that we owe it to the community to turn over the leaves out there and just to find out what else is out there.
So, sure, Kayla?
It's my understanding that we did follow a due process with this. It went on the typical listservs. It went through the typical process, Brad. So I feel as though we did turn over the leaves and uncover the rocks, and it just people did not apply.
Well, the question is a little deeper than what you're saying. Number one, where did Don? You had mentioned you wanted to send it out to some friends of yours. Who did you send it out to?
Brad, can I interrupt here? And I'm going to interrupt here. Here's the deal: you sent an email out to the entire committee, as we asked you, that you do, and that's our process. All right. Let me just paraphrase your email. Requesting a discussion of contract planner distribution. Where it was sent, how it was advertised, what communications between potential planners and the town and/or the committee took place, and what, if any, attempts were made to solicit bids during the bidding process. Now, I'm paraphrasing, but that's what you said. And then you closed with this, I quote, "It is, though, a conversation that ought to be that should be had publicly to assure that the community that we did our best to obtain multiple bids." Yes. So I will tell you that as I read that, especially when you use the term committee with communicating with bidders, that this seems to be a continued history of you to actually operate, I guess I'll use the term supra-legally. We have no business to do that. If we, as a committee, invest our confidence in the town, and we all have, at the beginning of this process, gotten a purchasing policy of the town of Raymond that was adopted 1/9/2018 by the Select Board, and I quote, "The request for proposals competitive process shall consist of the following: identifying all significant evaluation factors, including price and cost, and their relative importance and weighting. Proposals are solicited from an adequate number of qualified sources." What you are implying to me in this email is that that was not done, and that to suggest that the committee reached out and actually talked to bidders while there was the process going on would be an extra legal activity. So I know you can shake your head at this, but I will tell you this, Brad. This line of questioning is out of order. It's out of order. So, Don?
Yeah, I think Sue is prepared to talk about what she did, but I don't think that I want her to do that because, I mean, we can provide that information. But I have a few thoughts, and that is that if anything, on this particular solicitation, we went a lot further than what we normally do and what other towns normally do. Normally what you do is you advertise this RFP on sites like MMA, on the website. You might buy newspaper ads. You put it, I think in this case, we put it on the planner's listserv. So it's really incumbent upon the professionals to monitor those things. And if they're interested in the opportunities that present themselves through those portals and venues, then that's on them. We never, ever, ever reach back. Because when you reach back to an individual, you have an individual conversation, and that's inappropriate. Sometimes they reach to us. And so when they do that, we record the question, answer the question, send it to everybody who's expressed interest. Right. And so, I mean, I think what Sue did in this case, in terms of the solicitation, back to the solicitation, she looked everywhere she could find, consulted with people, you know, talked about who's in this business, and we actually proactively sent it to them, which is way more than most towns do. But that's what we did. And so we got one response. That's unfortunate. I would have liked to have had 10 responses. I'm not sure there are 10 people in the field doing this. Now, we did have a late to the game inquiry, you know, a firm that we were unaware of, you know, contacted us after the deadline and said they would be interested should this thing be re-advertised. That's up to you. But I can assure you that the process that was employed that resulted in the one presentation, the one proposal, was 100% as it should be, and even more so in the sense of how hard Sue tried to get this thing out there. She talked to me about it. We knew it was going to be difficult because planning and comprehensive planning is not what it used to be in terms of the number of consultants that are engaged in it.
And Don, thank you for that explanation, although I don't think it's necessary. I have one question for you.
Sure.
All right. The proposals, were they solicited from an adequate number of qualified providers?
Yes.
Then you followed the policy of the town.
Yes.
Brad, if you get a problem, you talk to the select board because it's their signatures that are on this policy. Otherwise, this conversation is at an end because it's out of order. Can I ask Sue? So,
Peter,
this is the question of the night. Can you tell us what North Star's proposal was as far as cost?
Yes. It is on my other laptop that's sitting in my lap. And
Oops, no, there's only one bidder.
Yeah. Oh, come on.
While she's looking at that, I just want to make an observation. This particular planner has done all of our, all the towns around us, and that may not just, because I mean, they may be the only ones sort of around. I mean, that just may be, they're the ones that kind of, yeah, there's a reason for that, and I'm willing to bank on they're the only ones applying.
So what they bid was to do everything. And put a caveat at the beginning of it that it would be negotiated based on what the town staff and or committee would be doing. Yep. But to do inventory and analysis, vision, values, attitudes, goals, policies, strategies, future land use, implementation, plan drafting, review, and adoption. Those 5 tasks are $99,310. They then included direct expenses, printing and website at $1,000 and mileage at $400 for a grand total of $100,710.
Thank you. So basically what we're talking about, the proposal was, as I understand it, is for a little under if I understand it, it's a little under 1,000 hours. So we're talking about $100 an hour. We discussed that at the last meeting.
That's the full meal deal. We would do a lot of that work, and we would negotiate that number.
Absolutely. So germane to my question of North Star, as far as how would you vision that we would utilize, let's say, a intern from St. Joseph's? You know, if they were going to say, if she did part of the inventory, let's say 50 or 100 hours of that, that basically is at no cost to us, as I understand.
Well, that would be the intern, but the other big piece of it is how much are you willing to do?
How much are we willing to do?
And the staff willing to do?
And how much is staff willing to do? So all that is negotiable.
And we have to have a long discussion about that before you'd ever, come to a position where typically I negotiate these things on behalf of the town.
Correct.
And, if somebody from the committee wanted to be involved in that would be fine, but.
I believe that's actually in the policy.
Yeah. What, did I negotiate it or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I'm confident that number can be reduced. I was hoping for a smaller number, but I had a sense that it could be an even much larger number given what's happening.
So in this number, it's a 22-month-ish.
18, I thought, was what was in the proposal.
More than a year's worth of work. But I know for myself, when he mentioned, some committees want to be the ones actually writing the plan, I do not feel qualified to write a chapter on a plan.
I don't think the writing part is something that I would do, that you would do.
But I liked his suggestion that it was, that we would be kind of the liaisons between the information that they do and provide to us and the
Jackie,
public. And
the phrase that I heard used several times was the higher order or the higher questions. So as an example, the vision statement, which we've talked about before, and some had suggested, we're getting ahead of ourselves, the planner's going to do that. The planner may put that vision statement together in a format that can be placed in a plan. But that vision statement and what's included in it really comes from the community, and then we craft it. And once the planners see the vision statement,
take it to words.
Exactly. They can put it in the format. They can format it. Yes.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The other thing they said about the vision statement is, they take what we're able to come up with and tell us what's measurable out of it. They extrapolate what needs to be practical in order for us to put the next steps in place, so that we're not just doing the apple pie mom and pop vision statement. We're doing one that actually works for our town and is productive and is of value to what we're putting into it.
I agree.
I was just going to say that in my experience, when you get this initial number, and this has happened a number of different times, it happened when we did the community survey in 2014, they throw at you a number that they're comfortable with in the event that they're not going to get much assistance or any assistance. And so that's why he talks about it being negotiable. So, you have to decide. We talk about it to figure out what it is we could do, and then we would have to assign a value ourselves to that, and then, task me to go back and negotiate with them if you went with this firm, or you can, you could go out and try to re-advertise it. But I'm telling you, on that point, there's nothing wrong with what we did. It yielded what we got.
Yeah. And so the discussion we will have at the meeting going forward is going to be how much of it are we willing to assume as far as the working of this plan. How much can be contributed by the town staff, and how much, if any, but my guess is it's going to be significant that the St. Joe's intern...
And we may have the opportunity, by the way, to get more than one.
And maybe get more than one.
And she's right on point. So basically, you may have somebody who's an environmental scientist. That would be great. You get people who are in different specialties, I don't know what they offer for specialties there, but basically, if we could get 2 or 3 students, and that'll be the thing. We have to, have a match. And I forget her name. I'm sorry, but she's right about the idea that, or somebody brought up the idea that sometimes it's a learning experience for them, and you help to define what their interests are. That is true. That can happen, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for somebody who already knows what it is they want to do. They already have this major. They already have this direction. They already have some level of capability. This is not rocket science. A lot of towns use GP COG at a cheaper rate with AmeriCorps people. So that's what we have to decide. How much you want to do, how many interns we want to try to obtain, how much you're going to push onto the staff. Then that's what we do.
All right, so I guess not, because the hour is late, I would ask at this point that does the committee feel at this point we are prepared to either vote yes or no on asking Don to go forward with contract negotiations with North Star Planning. I'll just survey the group.
I'm certainly comfortable with that.
Yeah. All right. Does someone want to make a motion?
I motion for, I don't know how I would say this, but I guess I motion for to allow the town to begin negotiations with North Star Planning.
I'd second that motion.
Is there any discussion? Brad?
Yes. I think, first off, my comments were not at all accusatory, and that needs to be made clear on the record here. They were, I think we can go out and do a better job of that. Don, I respect your comments, but I don't agree with them in terms of contacting people. Secondly, there's word that there was another party that approached us. I'd like to hear about that before voting on this one. I think we owe it to the community.
Brad, my understanding is that individual approached us after the bidding period. Therefore, it's not germane to this conversation unless we repost the bid.
If we decide to, which we can, but we ought to hear about it.
That's all, you've just said all we know about it.
Yeah, I don't think we can know more about it. They didn't apply in a timely manner, so we do know nothing about it.
And all they did is reach out to the town and express interest should we re-advertise.
All right, well, you answer to the town. This bid came in at twice what my expectation was.
Yeah, well, so we have a motion and a second. And as I understand it, the motion, just to reiterate it, it's to authorize the town manager to enter into negotiations.
Frank had his hand.
Oh, Frank.
Frank's got a comment.
Do you have a question, Frank?
No?
No. All right. Okay. So the motion is this committee authorizing the town manager to enter into contract negotiations with North Star Planning for the purpose of providing contract planning for the Comprehensive Plan Committee. We've got a motion, a second. Yes. All in favor? Opposed? All right. So we've got 9 yes and 1 no. Any other committee member comments?
I guess that just leaves one question for me, and we kind of need to decide, I guess, at some point what we're willing to take on, right? So for him to enter into.
I can't actually enter into negotiations till we have a discussion.
So we're probably either going to.
Sure. So we've pre-authorized it after we determine the metrics of what we're willing to do. You come back with us, Don, with what you believe the staff can do. Sue, if you could research what St. Joe's has available as far as hours for us, and then we can formulate and give Dawn the guidance as to how much is negotiable as far as the 900 and some odd hours that is contained in this bid.
I guess that's what I was asking for, is that we can.
And should I send the fee proposal to the committee at this point?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes. The idea originally was, of course, to do it, cost blind, because we thought we were going to have multiple proposals.
Sure.
And to select the one that we thought was the best fit for the town, had the right, approach and core competencies. But, we got one response, and we really went overboard in trying to, I guess, make this known and to promote interest in it. And, that's all I can say about it.
Great. So there's no public I see Derek up there, but there's no public for any comments?
No, there are
not. No. All right, I'd accept a motion to adjourn.
So second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.